So today I want to cover mainly two aspects of product manager, which is like the core or the meat, if you will. Talking about product discovery and product delivery, but how do you manage those at scale? So it happened to me like when I'm managing like smaller teams of people versus larger team of people, it's totally a different picture when you think about managing discovery and delivery overall. So I want to touch base on this two, like these nuances as we go. So how to build a product at scale. So as I started, it's very different when you have a small team and start shipping products versus when you have a huge team. And by huge, I mean, let's say 200, that's the largest team I've worked, globally like dispersed and trying to pull it off. So when you switch to this bigger teams, it seems to me more like you need to apply these startup rules, even though if you're like in global organization like UI, it's very different like from the operational standpoint on how to engage team, how to make it, how to execute, and how to make a product, you know, from conception to delivery like very effective. So in that perspective, I think that in order to build a product at scale, you need first to have a very effective product management organization, right? So we're going to talk more about that. You need to have a great team, by far. You need to have a great culture within the team. You need to have great execution, and you need to like use state-of-the-art technology. So let's go into product management organization. So if you're not embedded by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. Ray Altman says, right? Many, like especially in the corporate world, a lot of people want to kind of be like ship the product at the best version possible so we can deliver and deploy to the clients. Whereas no product is perfect at the first try. It's going to have a lot of bugs, defects, probably QA isn't even effective, so probably it's going to fail several times. You need a number of iterations, or even though like you haven't solved the customer problem with the first try because you never talk to the customers, right? So how do you make sure that the product that you've built or that first version of the product is the right one, right? Well, the only way for you to be sure about that is to like build fast, you know, put it in front of the users, and you know get feedback and iterate, right? So what's important here is, and this is like the mindset that the corporate was starting to kind of like shift right now, is to try embed this, you know, principles of agile, right? So agility to, you know, build fast, fail fast in a way, in order to get feedback, in order to build a better product as you increment, right? So and like the first version of that product is called an MVP, or a minimum viable product, which basically helps you validate your first product hypothesis, right? Without that validation, so in order for you to validate that hypothesis, you don't need a perfect product. You need a minimum amount of effort, right? With a minimum amount of or effort of development time, right? So it's less costly. So you don't want to spend like $1 million to realize that you don't need that product. You have to reiterate because you want to make it perfect. There are a number of methodologies we use in product management, right? So you heard about agile methodologies is the most famous one, where Scrum, right? It's widely used, but you have also Kanban, extreme programming, and so on and so forth. Mainly like companies, corporates are trying to switch to agile overall development and using Scrum. But the adoption to true agile, it's a long process. So some people, like, especially like if you want to manage like teams of, let's say you have 200 Scrum teams or 500 Scrum teams, you have like these global bands, have hundreds of Scrum teams, like what methodology should they use, right? Is it scale agile or safe, right? Maybe it is. For some organization it was perfectly fine, but for some it doesn't. But why it doesn't work? The problem is that many organizations evolve differently and many teams evolve differently. So they have different legacy when it comes to technology, processes, mindset, team members, and so on and so forth. So getting like one framework and just implementing into a team or organization and thinking that it will magically work, well, it doesn't work like that, right? therefore, you see like some organization be like, all right, we're trying agile or we're trying safe, but it doesn't really work. So we're going to fall back to what we know best, which is waterfall, right? So they try to do like some waterfall development or waterfall like project management slash product management, right? And trying to put some agile principles into the mix. So you find to have this hybrid, agile methodology, which works for a moment, but probably doesn't work that perfectly that you want to have, you want to be, right? Spotify, they came up with their own agile model. So they created one from scratch, which works perfect for them. So the lesson learned here for me is that one size, for example, doesn't fit all. You should be looking at what's your best methodology for your team and for your organization, right? Try to adjust the methodology to your team and overall your organization. Try to execute it and make sure you try to efficiently ship and sense the market on how your product is doing. If that methodology allows you to go through the full product management, like product life cycle in an efficient way, then it's good. Otherwise, if any of this, like even if you go back, if it's not done correctly, then the cost of the product delivered at scale is going to rise significantly, right? So it's all a matter of, especially if you deploy to global organization, it's all a matter of cost in the end, right? So let's go to the management process in more detail. So as a product manager or as a product, you always start with the vision, right? So the vision kind of inspires the team and sets the tone of where will you go, right? So, but how do you get to the vision? In order for you to get to the product vision, you start with the strategy. So strategy is basically the plan on how to achieve that vision. And the plan can be like short-term, mid-term, or long-term eventually. Like there are a number of elements that feed the strategy, which are overall previous learnings from other products or other overall projects or engagements that the company has. You have conducted a number of user group or stakeholder interviews, right? Or you have done a certain market research or competitive analysis that you've seen like, all right, this is the market where the market is going. This is what our competition is doing. Maybe you should change the strategy towards the overall vision that we have, right? So when you define the product strategy, you come up with a list of business use cases where which you think that your product should tackle. And you start prioritizing your use cases, what's important for your company, right? Then you jump into the objectives and key results. Like, are you familiar with OKRs? Yes? All right, so OKRs is a very important topic because companies so it was invented by Intel, popularized by Google, and a lot of a number of tech companies globally use it widely within their organization. So basically helps your organization, product, and team align on all the objectives on a quarterly basis, most commonly, right? So, and then the end of the product strategy, you come up with kind of a high-level roadmap when it comes to those business use cases of what's important for you to build in the short-term, mid-term, or long-term from a business standpoint. The next step into the product process is you start with product discovery. So product discovery is like identifying what to build, right? So you have a number of business cases, and now you're going to be like, all right, so where do we start? So you start a discovery process, which usually starts with a user research and ends with a detailed product roadmap for a number of iterations or sprints, right? So usually here, the main, and we're going to go a little bit of more detail later on what product discovery means, but the goal of the product discovery is to log the product of what you're building and come up with a number of product releases, right? In order for you to be agile, these releases needs to be very effective from a product standpoint. So you shouldn't be documenting a lot of requirements. So if anyone of you has been a business analyst, if you know about BAs, they used to write this product requirement document or BRDs or PRDs or business requirement documentation, which is like a 100-page document, which probably very few people understood. And it took a lot of time and effort to come up with that. Now, The problem is that while you write the document, the market changes. So unless you wrote like a number of features, build those features, test it with the users, get that feedback, and learn from that experience, then it's easier for you to write the next batch of requirements, and therefore you're more agile, so you adapt to the market changes, but at the same time you don't waste time and effort in this process. So after product discovery, you got to product delivery, right? Product delivery is about building software and ship incremental software pieces. All right, so product delivery is about shipping software in an incremental way, right? So in Agile or Scrum, so we have sprints where every iteration, which usually is 2 weeks, you ship a piece of working software. You end up with product deployment. So once you build your product, you start deploying it to the client or an organization or to your users, right? Here, what you do is during deployment, you kind of come up with feedback of how the user are using the product. Have you solved this problem that the user have had in the beginning? So, and then you start testing your hypothesis, right? You do that with feedback, customer surveys, and you track metrics. So anything related to what's the definition of the success in the beginning, right? So when you define success, you have a number of metrics that are important for you from a business standpoint and product standpoint, and based off of that, you learn how the deployment is going overall. Now, here there are two things. Based on this feedback that you get from the deployment, you need to go and revise the product strategy because you learn something new, or the overall vision, which is rarely happen usually because vision is very holistic and very high level. But it happens, right? So at this point, it's important to minimize the output and maximize the outcome and impact. And what do I mean by that? So before I move on, is there any question here so far? All good? Clear? So outcome versus output. So output is more about what you did, right? In terms of deliverables. I created a number like this number of design or UX design screens. I coded 1,000 lines of code, right? I wrote this number of user stories or feature set, right? So it's more about like the work product that your team does. But how does it help you with the product overall? Like how does it tell if the product is successful or not? Well, it doesn't, because even if you wrote like 1 million lines of code, doesn't mean that the product will be successful. What actually is successful is the outcome, or like what's the business impact of the product. How it is affecting the users, how are those business metrics, reacting, and is it beneficial for the overall organization if the product is deployed successfully, right? So a lot of teams, what I've seen is they tend to measure the output. This is what we did, right? These are the number of screens. This is the code, awesome code we wrote. User stories are great quality. Look at this prototype, it's awesome. It's clickable and it's kind of shows you like the real product without building it, so it's great. Yes, but it doesn't tell me about how the product is impacting my user base, right? So it's important to focus on the outcome, on the business impact of the product and to measure them rather than focusing on the outputs of the team, right? This is why this is important. So going back to the product management process, these are the main activities that you'd see during product discovery, delivery, and deployment, right? So as I mentioned, you start with customer discovery. Basically tells you like who the users are, what problem they're trying to solve, and how you're going to tackle, so overall like the product, right? And how is that aligned to your strategy and to your vision, right? Then once you define that, you start this exercise, which basically is feature decomposition. You start writing the feature set. There's this technique defined by Jeff Patton, which is story mapping or user story mapping. Are you familiar with that? So user story mapping is a very, I think, effective technique to document stories. So Jeff Patton has a book around user story mapping. So if you Google it, it's a great book. If you want to be like a hands-on product manager, you should read that because it's one of the best ways to document features and engage all the stakeholders in the product environment. right? So once you get the feature set, and that feature set will serve you to do like the first pass of feature prioritization. So think of it as the business will come to you and be like, when can we get this feature done by? And then you haven't written any user stories or any technical designs, you have known nothing. But still, you need to come up with a sense of delivery time frame. So what we do is basically we come up with like a 50% confidence roadmap, where we do some t-shirt sizing in terms of like a feature size with engineering, of course. And we use the story map exercise to slice out the releases and continue and kind of give a 50% confidence estimation on when the feature can be delivered. So like the story map is a great way to visualize all the features as well as slice up the releases, and it will help engineering as well as all the product stakeholders to have a discussion around what can be delivered by when, like as a first conversation. Then what we do is you get that feature set and you hand it over to the design team. Because think of it as one feature set from a UX perspective or user experience perspective can be deployed in 100 different ways, right? So when you write like features or user stories, like from a product standpoint, you shouldn't be focusing on how it will look like on the screen, but you should mainly capture the functionality. Whereas the role of the UX designers or UI designers is to get that feature set and make it as intuitive as possible from a UX standpoint, right? After UX design, you can do prototyping, so you can do usability testing. You can start early testing with the users without actually coding it. It's a better way to start testing your product hypothesis because it's cheaper. So if you want to change something on your product, you just change the color or the button from one, it takes a minute. Whereas if you have already coded it, it takes more. And it's like engineering time as well involved, which is pretty expensive. Once you're prototyping, you go to technical design. So basically, you start writing user stories. As a product manager, you should be writing user stories with acceptance criteria. Get the user stories and go with the engineering in this, what we call like grooming sessions. So basically, you work with engineers to come up with technical tasks for each of the user stories. And based off of that, you go into sizing those user stories and come up with a release definition and a detailed product roadmap. So at this point, you're coming up with a backlog of like 3 to 4 iterations or sprints. So it will enable you to have enough work for engineering to start working on. And at the same time, you can start working on the next batch of user stories. So product delivery, when you jump to product delivery, so there is this concept of this dual track agile. Anyone familiar with this concept? So dual track agile, it's when you split the team, like the product team, into 2 tracks, right? In parallel. So one track is focused on sensing the market and talking to the users, whereas the other track or the other part of the team focuses on delivering those features, right? We're going to jump more in detail what dual track agile is. So basically you have continuous discovery. So discovery work doesn't end where product discovery ends as a phase, but continues throughout. And then you kick off delivery. So basically you start building software, right? That includes release delivery, quality assurance, and testing. Product deployment is about measuring and monitoring post-release, right? Training and communication and product support, which is pretty common concept. Any questions here so far? Awesome. All clear, or nobody understood anything? So in dual track agile, you have 2 parallel tracks. So the best way to see this is that you have the product manager and the design team and the researchers trying to understand how the market is behaving or your user base on your iterations and your product, adding new opportunities, ideas, or problems, right? Log everything that's happening from the requirement opportunity standpoint, delete any opportunity by everything, like you log everything, like if anything is not relevant, so you kind of keep sanitizing your product backlog. And you come up with this release backlog. So when you think about releases, you'll be like, all right, so this is what we learned from the previous release software. Now, like, we're going to change the backlog, and this is what you're going to build now. So that's why keeping a very short backlog in the beginning, like 3 to 4 iterations, right, which is basically like maximum of 8 weeks, right, worth of development work, allows you to make these changes as you go. And if you see here, you have this larger loops and you have smaller loops because processes are different. You have a number of processes happening during product discovery, which is related to user research, design, usability testing, or overall, testing, as well as you have like process related to product management when you come market trends and like competition, competitive analysis, and so on and so forth. Whereas on the delivery track, it's more, the loops are like kind of the iterations, which are a fine number of weeks in a sprint. Usually it goes from 1 to 4 weeks. It depends on the team. Ideally, it's 2 weeks. I've seen startups use 1 week sprints because startups by nature, they grow every week. So as a startup, if you don't grow every week, that means that you're going to be out of the market soon. Whereas in more like stable organization, it's sometimes 4 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks usually. What's important here is that when you start the first iteration of the delivery track, you initially have a potentially releasable software. Then in the next spring, you go towards a full release or a manual release. It depends where you're in the cycle. As you ship out, there's this build, measure, learn loop, which is like coined by Eric Ries, this book, The Startup Way, which basically, when you build a product, you measure the impact, you learn from it, and you start building again. So this is basically the build, measure, learn loop is kind of coined overall in this dual track agile. So the first track will help you learn and measure, and the second track will help you build. How to enable it? Yeah, I thought about this question. So structure your product into foster an efficient two-way communication between 2 tracks. So usually you're going to have the product manager who's like basically overarching, oversees everything. But he's going to be the product manager. He or she is going to be more on the discovery track, whereas the product associate or scrum master will help with the delivery track from a product standpoint. So usually what I've done is I've kept myself more working with designers and lead engineers and business stakeholders on like what's coming next on the product release, whereas a product associate, which acted as Scrum Master, was entitled writing the user stories and managing the sprint ceremonies. Next is like test automation. So make sure that you have automated testing as part of your development practices. Manual testing is a lot of effort. So I've seen both automated testing and manual testing being implemented. And manual testing, it's basically a lot of manual work, which it's not that great. But when you start like actually coding, you need to make sure that at least 80% of your code base is covered by like unit tests. So this is critical about testing overall, because once you start deploying new code or new releases into the production environment, you're going to always start breaking other stuff. And in order for you to check what you broke, unit test will help you in the process overall. 100% unit test is like a lot of work for the engineer. So basically, you need to. This impacts overall the product delivery timeline, because it's kind of like one-to-one based on the engineering practices. So if you put a sprint for coding, you need another sprint just to write unit testing on 100% coverage usually. So let's talk about team. So the second point is you need to have a great team in order to build a great product at scale. And when you think about the team, I think about this. So I was hearing this podcast from Ray Hoffman, Master of Scale, and his suggestion was, when you think about the team, you should be the hero of your own story. So think of it as all your teammates, everybody needs to have a story to tell, right? And in that story, they should be their heroes on themselves. So if I'm a PM, I should own my work. If I'm an engineer, I should have my story of what I did in the product. This serves as a great motivation and team management from, from the product manager standpoint. If you have a team of heroes, then you can build great products. You should work with the best to build product at scale. Like mediocre engineers don't build great products. Like that's a fact. You cannot do anything about it. So questions to ask about your team, like, are they smart? Usually like when I'm like working with my coworkers, so every time I work with coworkers that are smarter than me, I felt more motivated. Because I wanted to kind of, it felt like a competition with it, like a healthy competition, right? Are they passionate about their work? Usually passion drives creativity, right? Do they get these things done? Do they talk about things or delegate? You see a lot of delegation happening because people want to be managers, but they forget about, well, you lost like 2 weeks in delegating where you could have done this in a day if you just get it done and get over with, right? Do they leave their ego outside the office? So sometimes like a faulty coworker is like cancer in the team. It spreads really fast. It will ruin your entire team, especially if the team is small. The impact of a faulty coworker in a small team is huge. It can kill the entire team. For startups, it will kill the startup, the entire company. Do they care about team members? Caring is great because you cannot hide it. If you're a person who don't care in a small team, again, the impact is huge. And the last thing is, do they grow fast professionally? This is like oxygen to the team, professional growth. If someone, like if I'm working with another product manager who has done something great from a PM standpoint, I'll be eager to get that too. So I would grow with the person eventually, right? If you have a great engineer has written a great code, you'll learn from that engineer and your code will be better. So it like affects the entire team overall. So the product manager overall is a leader without authority, is responsible for everything that happens with the product. So if the engineering built a feature incorrectly, that's product manager's fault at the end of the day. Like, it's not like, you're not gonna be like, yeah, but that engineer did it, it's not my fault. It's your fault, regardless. That's why you need to be internally like very connected with your team. The product manager participates in all product management activities, but doesn't lead in all. So there is concept about that, oh, the PM should just do a PM job, like manage Scrum ceremonies, but like the UX researcher will take care of the UX research, designers on the design, and engineering on the engineering activities. To me, that's not true. Like the product manager, engineering, design should be the trio that they should be in every single process throughout. But as leaders, in each phase of the discovery and delivery process, you can have different leaders, right? So for let's say customer discovery, the UX researcher will lead, but other team members will be part of that activity, right? And so on and so forth for the other activities in the product delivery. Same goes for in discovery. Same goes for product delivery, right? When we talk about release, quality assurance, and testing, you have leaders for every of each activities, but other team members of the product team should be aware of what's happening and should choose to get involved in any level of details they need to and contribute, right? Because they can bring different insights in the process. And it's good that engineering knows about the PM process, design process, and also like they hear how the user react to their product. It's very important to get that insight directly, rather than filtered through the PM or other team members. So next thing is culture. This to me is very important because, as Peter Drucker says, culture is strategy for breakfast. So you can strategize as long as you want. If you don't have the right team culture, it will kill the entire team or product. It's unbelievable. I've seen so many times where the people with the wrong mindset jump into the new team with a totally different mindset and try to do things that way. And all of a sudden they're like, how come this doesn't work? Like, I did everything possible, but something is not working. well, guess what? Like, if you're a consultant, you have one certain mindset. You cannot just go to a tech company and be successful just like on day one. First, you need to be like, all right, how is everybody around me thinking? What's their perspective? And how should I craft the message to adjust to the person's mindset and to the person's perspective? It's very important. Especially as a PM, you work with business, design, engineers, testers, DevOps, QA, managers, all people from different backgrounds, from different mindsets. You need to make sure that you understand everybody's language, how everybody thinks and perceive things. A lot of people think about purpose when they build a product. Like, where is this going overall? Like, why am I doing this? Have you ever gotten this feeling? So when I was working for the Prime Minister, so I was involved in a number of telecommunication and e-government projects which impacted the entire country and the entire population, and basically set the pace for other like initiatives to come after that. Talking about, let's say, 3G, 4G rollouts, a number of like e-government and products and systems that automated a lot of public services that are still in use today and will never like go away. That sense of purpose, that the impact you're going to make, like justified all the hardship in the work. And one thing is to have purpose of where this is going. Second thing is my manager evaluating my effort? Does he or she like recognize what I'm doing? If it does, and you have a great purpose of where this is going, it's key to kind of have the like a great culture within your team. That everybody will stick around as one, like 100%. Emotional intelligence. So when I think about emotional intelligence, it's about being empathetic, self-aware, and recognizing people around you. So my previous boss used to say that if I have to look at all the negative traits that my coworkers have, then I would have been left with no coworkers. Like, nobody's perfect. You need to understand others people's feeling. You need to, like, empathy is key, right? And you need to like be grateful to everybody you're working with all the time and help them grow with you. Trust, I think it's one of the core traits to have a great culture. So trust, I think, is twofold. First is from your side. You need to build trust with your managers. You need to deliver. You need to be humble. And you need to be respectful of team members. They need to like contribute to the team regardless. We have this goal to make the team grow and have a good purpose behind it. Once you deliver your results and have this sense that you as a person help other people grow with you for the best of the team overall, then you're going to gain trust from your leadership and from managers. In that perspective, what you expect is that to have your back, because things definitely will go awry in a way. Things will go wrong, but situation doesn't define you. If your product will fail, doesn't mean you are a failure. And the leadership should know that, right? The situation doesn't define you. You will fail and fail and fail until you succeed overall, because this is how market reacts. There are a lot of factors, like especially in the startup world, this is more common because failures, like 99% of startups fail. So we celebrate failure in the startup world, right? I'm saying we because I'm not anymore there, but eventually when I was. But it helped us learn a lot, and then kept us trying in terms of like, all right, so what's the next projects and what have we learned from our previous experiences so we can succeed? So in order for you to do that in a corporate environment, you need to have leadership, back. The leadership needs to have your back, basically. So a great work environment keeps the talent inside. So it's one thing hiring the best, another thing keeping the best. Usually the best people have a lot of options, especially in countries like the United States, right? A lot of opportunities. You get pinged by recruiters every day. There are so many things you can do in different industries as well. In order for you to keep the talent inside, Create a culture of experimentation so people can experiment, fail fast, and learn from that. And this will enable them to grow, as well as test different ways on how to build stuff. Give credit to the team for the wins, not blame the individual for the losses. Show that you care and actually mean it, and grow professionally continuously. Like, professional growth to me is like oxygen to the team overall. Like, things change very fast today. New skills are required for you to have, especially as a PM. You need to understand design, engineering, research, testing, market, competition. There are a lot of skills you should have as a PM. Growing professional should be like your #1 priority. You should like every day learn something new. Like, I never felt like I know everything, ever. Like, every time I talk to a product manager, I felt like, oh, there's so many things I don't know. So I think I should read, what's the next book I should read? What's the next thing I should learn? Solving hard business problems drive professional growth and motivation. This is something that I learned from practice. When I became a government executive, I had probably one of the toughest problems in the country to solve. Didn't solve it myself, I solved it as a team, of course. But what I realized is that first, pressure exposes your real mindset. When you're under pressure, like, you're no matter how good you think you are, as long as the first time you're under pressure, your real you is going to come out, like 100%. By exposing your real mindset, this serves as kind of like a feedback loop for yourself to kind of understand yourself and improve. So I think it's like the best way to improve if you're under pressure. Expose yourself to complexity is the fastest way to grow. Solve hard business problems, you're going to learn a ton. In 2 years, I was involved with telecom regulation and telecom policy. I learned as much as a person that had worked in the same industry for 20 years, for the past 20 years. Why? Because I was like operating at executive level on a daily basis. And that's it. Complexity brings you a lot of insights, skills, and knowledge. So try to solve hard business problems with your product. Anybody can do the easy stuff. Anybody. You're not going to be competitive if you have products that are easy to build and solve problems that are easy to be solved. And this is where also a lot of startups, going back to the startup world, they differentiate themselves. Startups usually solve hard business problems because first they motivate the team, and second, the competition drops significantly. So let's talk about execution. The product manager has 5 jobs. So basically, you set the vision and strategy, you evangelize about the products internally and with other stakeholders. You plan and execute the product throughout the product lifecycle. Hire and manage. Anybody has hired or fired anyone? So team management. One key thing I've noticed is that if you give ownership and hold the team member accountable, they will think and act differently. Even personally, as long as you be like, you're in charge, come with me with the results, all of a sudden you feel like, oh, I don't have anyone to rely on. Now I'm responsible and I'm going to have accountable for. You start thinking differently from day one, like 100%. If you have the person be like, hey, so this is what you need to do, come back to me, I'll give you feedback on your work so you can improve, it will not help, based on my experience. It's a longer process in like how the person evolves and takes responsibility, right? So responsibility makes you think and act differently. Make sure when you manage your team, give them responsibility and hold them accountable. They should learn, everybody in your team should learn from day one. Decentralized decision-making by empowering the team member with the information. This is very hard to do. It's easier than it sounds because of the responsibility that you have. If you're like a chief product manager and you have like, let's say, 100 people under you and you feel like empowered to make a decision because your job is on the line, and then by instinct you're going to make all the decisions for your team, that doesn't scale. The person who has the information should make the decision. If the UX researcher talks to the users and has a certain information, he or she should make the decision, on what to be built next. You shouldn't go up to the chain to the chief product manager and be like, hey, what should we do here? If the engineering thinks a new technology comes in and we need to use that technology because it will give us some market advantage, then the engineering lead should take the decision. It shouldn't go up the chain again. It's very important when you scale. I've seen big teams not scaling or having problems of scaling product. When you think about the product manager or anyone involved in the product team, there are two things. One is you're hands-on and you have this operating rhythm that like every day or so, or a certain pattern, you do something, you deliver something. You either learn something new, you ship a product, you talk to a user, you check the UX design, you give some feedback somewhere. There's always an operating rhythm that you operate, and the team should be on this rhythm as a whole. And it helps actually in Agile because once you have the sprint development work, which is every 2 weeks, it helps you with the rhythm. And on top of it, you have dual track, so you have more cycles on top of development work. That gives the entire team end-to-end an operating rhythm, which is important for you to scale overall. Being hands-on is key. Like, you shouldn't be like, oh, this is not my job. If you can't do it, just do it. It doesn't matter. What's important is to deliver the product that people want and love, and you solve the customer problem. It doesn't matter who does, because in the end, everybody will be rewarded. Like, you should win as a team, not as individual. So lastly, it's about technology. Very quick here. Keep updating with the latest technology trends, especially in UX, UI designs. It's key because, especially if you have a B2C product, there are some certain expectations the user have. B2B products, they're less sensitive on the latest trends. And usually if you see B2B products aren't that intuitive overall. And I've seen a lot of companies, like global companies, deliver B2B products, which are, it seems like we're back in the 90s. Whereas you see this new app from a startup, it's like we're in the 2050s or something, right? That's the future. Apply latest technology to your product use cases. Always think about what's upcoming. So if you have artificial intelligence, machine learning, intelligent automation use cases, try to use the latest products, algorithms, and models for your use cases. It's key to get competitive advantage into the market. Technology should allow your product to scale at par or faster than competition. All right? So as a summary, in order to build a product at scale, as we said, empower your Scrum teams to make their own decisions and run independently. Create a culture which can attract and retain talent and where everybody is allowed to experiment. Align team's objective to your product and organization objectives using objectives and key results. There's actually a very good book. There are multiple books on OKRs. Just Google them. It's amazing. It's an amazing technique for a team. It's harder to implement. It's very easy to understand, but very hard to implement. But it's proven to be very effective. And if like Google, Facebook, or other big companies are using it widely, then why shouldn't you? Use an effective internal product management organization, talking about what's the best methodology to adapt to your team. Automating engineering processes to enable an efficient dual-track agile. If it's relevant for your team, sometimes dual-track agile is not relevant to your team, so don't use it if it's not. This is where you come like your sense in like what works for my team and what doesn't. Take advantage of the latest technology and UX UI design trends, and most of all, maximize the outcome and minimize the output. Think about business impact when you ship your products to the market and to the users. So I want to end with this, like Jeff Bezos, I'm not going to read it, but basically it talks about this motivation that is behind on any product you build. It's not about money. If you build a great product, money will come. But what motivates you isn't money. It's the change you make with your product and the impact you have in the market. So thank you for joining. I hope it was relevant for you.